contrast Baron Holbach, we have the soft determinist position, more contemporary soft determinism than Stoicism's own, in the form of Walter Stace. Walter Stace was a London-born philosopher who lived from 1886 to 1967. So someone who died in just a little over 50 years ago, right? That's super contemporary by our standards. And his position was that we are using the wrong definition of free will in this debate. Right? To have free will does not mean to be indeterminate, right? Indeterminate. That not everything is determined by prior causes on the physical side. It's merely to say that to have free will is to have the freedom for to have mental freedom and the ability to choose, right? Which was, according to Stace, quite aside from the question of whether or not physical events are caused, right? Walter Stace thought that free will should be defined by the common sense understanding, right? That idea that we have the freedom to choose, the ability to choose otherwise. Right? And he delineated this difference between a free act and an unfree act as the difference between when the cause for an act is internal and immediate, when it occurs initially in the mind and then sees itself resolved in action as a result. That is a free act. Whereas when the cause for an action or a choice is external and immediate, that is an unfree act. So it's a matter of environmental circumstances. Right? Is it the external environment that dictates the choice? Or is it a choice originating from the mind outflowing into action and affecting change upon the world in that direction? Right? That determines whether an action is free or not. I'll give you a couple of examples to help illustrate this point. You are hungry. So you pause this video, you get up, you leave the lecture to go and grab a bite to eat. That's a free act. Because what's the genesis of that action? You feel hungry, you think, I'm going to grab a bite to eat. You hit pause, you get up, you go and get that bite to eat. Versus you are, you're not feeling particularly hungry, and, your best friend comes barging into this room going, hey, we're going to Bennigan's. I don't know, Bennigan's still a thing? Maybe it is. I don't know, right? Grabs your wrist and drags you out. And it's like, and so the genesis of that action, right, of that choice is that you didn't choose it. Someone else made the choice for you. Hand on wrist, dragging you out. That's not something that you're choosing at the moment. It's being, the decision's being taken out of your hands, so to speak. Another example, right? Reverse order this time. A man who does not eat because he is in the desert, starving, because there's no food around. Right? That's an unfree act. Versus Gandhi choosing not to eat because Gandhi was rich. Gandhi ji had a lot of, he had personal cooks, right? It's not like he didn't. It's not like he didn't have the opportunity to eat, right? Gandhi ji starving himself in an act of protest, nonviolent protest against the British, right? As the Indian comedian Veer Das put it, I mean, Gandhi chose to go on 17 different fasts as an act of as protest against British occupation and imperialism in India. That's not intermittent fasting. That's intermittent eating. Right? Uh, and he made those choices, or so Stace would have conclude. Right? So as he puts it, Walter Stace, that is, right? um, even psychologists and determinists act as if they're free when they leave the office. Right? And it's a pretty notion to appeal to common sense. But there are two particular problems with doing this. The first is that um, philosophy uh, does want to aim at truth, right? Not appearances, and an appeal to a common sense understanding without giving rigorous argumentation for one way or the other is just aiming at appearances. It appears that we have free will. That's our other common sense understanding. But is it true? It might be, but without a proper defense one way or the other, it's not a great argument, right? It just appeals to intuition. Second objection, which comes from this, is that soft determinism, we'll call it little d for short, um, really can be painted, according to this view, as hard determinism, big D for short, hard determin big D with commitment issues, right? Uh, it's just got all the elements of hard determinism right here, but doesn't want to take that last step. There's nothing here in Stace's theory that says explicitly that mental acts aren't determined as well. It just doesn't want to take that step. Much like the Stoics, right? Everything's determined except for our attitudes. We have choices with regards to those. And you can see the problem with that as well. It's insufficient for what we really want, or it's insufficient insofar as it fails to properly appreciate just how rigorous causality is uh, in our understanding of the physical world. Right? That's not to say that you can't have soft determinism um, as a valid argument, but to do so, you do have to pose that the mental is something entirely different from the physical, which goes against a lot of our understandings of the mind, or at least our contemporary understandings of the mind, modern understandings as defined by science. Right? And a good philosophy should be informed to a degree by science.